Thank you for joining us. We are going to be talking about reducing turnover, building stability, and training CNAs who stay and grow with us. A little bit about me. I've been a registered nurse for 27 years and have held nursing leadership experience or positions in long-term care, home health, home care, and hospice. And for about the last 10 years, I've been really working more in the training, workforce development, and curriculum design and development space. And so today we're really going to talk about CNA training and the difference between training and workforce preparation. And then we'll go through a case study about, what we're doing here at Cinematic Health, how we're able to really impact retention and help CNAs perform their best on the job. And then Chad will wrap up with a demo of our ReadyCNA product. All right, so let's dive in. And as Chad said, since we are a smaller group, you can let us know if you have any questions, and we'll definitely leave some time at the end as well for any questions. So let's start with what is the problem. So the problem is that our training floors have become ceilings. And what I mean by that is that we have, unfortunately, prioritized regulatory compliance over workforce preparation. And so what's happened is, we know that regulations give us a baseline of what CNAs need to know to be competent and to perform the job well. But that regulatory floor really was meant to be the bottom, and it's become the ceiling. And if we think about that, I don't know if you all are nurses or administrators, but in the long-term care space, a lot of times what we're doing is we're kind of checking boxes. Have they completed their 75 hours of training? Do they have their certification? Have they completed their continuing education for the year? And that is really just the baseline. And what happens when we just meet that bare minimum is we stifle innovation and development, and it really doesn't allow us to provide rigor in our training standards, and it hinders growth in our workforce. And what this yields is it creates a gap between the training that we provide and what we as employers need our caregivers or CNAs to have. We need them to have practical skills, coping skills, and applicable experience really to excel in their roles and to meet your expectation as the employer. So traditional training has created this gap between what you need and what training programs produce. And so the question becomes, is training enough? So what is training? Training really is just acquiring job-specific skills. So for a CNA training program, we know that there are federal regulations of a 75-hour minimum. What this typically ends up being, and it's a little different state by state, but in general, we end up with around 50 hours, 59 hours of classroom training, and then 16 hours of hands-on clinical lab training. So does this really provide them the skills that they need? And so there was a study, a 2008 study, and yes, that's a little older, but our training standards for CNAs, that 75-hour minimum, has not changed in many, many years. And so this 2008 study by the Institute of Medicine found that the current minimum federal training standards of 75 hours for CNAs is inadequate and leads not only to poor health outcomes for residents, but also to increased turnover for staff. If we think about what this looks like in practice is, CNAs have to do a state test, two different tests, right? When they finish their training programs, they do their written test, and then they also do a skills test. And most states roughly end up giving about 5 skills that they have to complete in 30 minutes. So for any nurses on the call, if you were to take a CNA and ask them to get a blood pressure, a partial bed bath, perform pericare, dress a resident, and feed them a meal, and they came back to you in 30 minutes and said, it's all done, how confident would you be in their skill? You likely would be thinking that something was not done correctly. And what happens is we teach them things, we teach them this, we have to do so many skills in 30 minutes, and they fail to really understand infection control. They fail to really understand resident safety and other key success metrics that really help them succeed on the job. And so what ends up happening is we actually set them up for failure, which turns into or becomes turnover for our employers. So we believe that the key to solving the turnover problem lies in our ability to improve workforce preparation and move away from a traditional training model. So what is workforce preparation? Workforce preparation is the process of developing and demonstrating skills and competencies that help people get or keep jobs or advance in their careers. So remember, training is acquiring skills, but we need workforce preparation. And workforce preparation goes beyond just the skills and really gives them the competencies that they need. So training doesn't give them what you need as an employer, because beyond their CNA certification, you want them to have power skills. We used to call these soft skills, but they're really power skills or human skills. They're the things that they need to do the job well and to succeed. They need to understand quality, safe, and holistic care. They need to know how to communicate well with other staff members, with other CNAs, with nurses, with therapists, with the residents and their families. They need to understand or know how to solve problems and how to escalate problems. And these are just a few examples of the power skills or human skills that they need on top of knowing how to wash their hands, knowing how to perform pericare, or knowing how to ambulate someone safely. So the impact when we really start to embrace this workforce preparation, the impact is that these skills then correlate with hiring and job success. So not only can I care for someone well, but I can care for someone and treat them in a way that really dignifies and respects them. And I also get the coping skills that I need as a member of the healthcare team to succeed on the job. So let's just look, and we're not going to go through this like word by word, but let's just look at the difference between training and the things that are listed in a training program versus a workforce preparation program. Workforce preparation still goes through all of the technical skills that they need, but on top of it, we teach them professionalism. We teach them the importance of attention to details, empathy, compassion. Again, all of those little things that take a person who has the desire to be a CNA and take them from just that basic training, that regulatory floor, and turn them into a really highly skilled member of your team that performs caregiving the way you want them to so that you have good patient outcomes. So let's talk a little bit more about workforce preparation through a case study and what we do at Cinematic Health with our ReadyCNA program. So our definition of success at Cinematic Health through our ReadyCNA program is not that your students just pass their state exam, but we want them to be equipped with the needed skills to thrive and succeed on the job. How do we achieve this? We provide through our training curriculum or content, we provide those power skills, soft skills, that go beyond training regulations. We use a storytelling lens and a multimodal learning um, process that provides 20x retention and job success. So not only are they going to complete all the required hours, but they actually remember it. Because we found that when we put a student in front of seeing caregiving come to life through our storytelling vignettes and episodes, they actually remember things about, we can teach someone how to de-escalate. I can tell you if you have someone in front of you that is having behaviors, they have Alzheimer's, I can tell you that you need to lower your voice, slow your speech, back away, give them space. But when they can see that in action in front of them, it comes to life and they remember that when they're on the job later, really working through those challenging caregiving situations that we know they'll be in. We also really weave this workforce preparation focus throughout our curriculum. And we also use visual text and auditory aids for better understanding. And what that does is it really helps us to meet the students where they are and how they learn, because we understand how adults learn and not everyone learns the same way. So again, our goal is not did they pass the training program, did they pass the state exam, but our goal is do they feel prepared on the job? Do you, as the employer, have confidence in their ability to perform that job well? And does that graduate have the skills and knowledge to perform the job, handle the stress of the work environment without leaving in those first 30, 60, 90 days? And hopefully they're there for years to come and they're a really good member of your workforce. So some of our current metrics is our graduates report a job readiness score of 4.6 out of 5. So that tells you that what they're learning is translating well into the workforce. And 93% of them also say that they feel confident on the job after completing our course content. And then on the customer side, excuse me, 92% of our customers are satisfied with on-the-job performance of a cinematic health grad in the first 3 months of employment. 100% are satisfied with their pass rates on the CNA certification exam. And that's the knowledge exam. And then 83% of customers believe that CNAs trained with ReadyCNA are less likely to turn over in the first 3 months compared to those not trained with this program. And here is a quote, a few quotes from Renee. So this is one of our clients, University of Vermont Medical Center, who says that ReadyCNA builds a strong pipeline of qualified CNAs. And that's really what having a training program as a long-term care facility does for you, is it helps you to create that pipeline, and you know that you have a strong pipeline of qualified caregivers. The 100% pass rate means faster onboarding, fewer vacancies, and it really helps maintain consistent staffing and care standards. So that's something that we're very proud of, that our employer partners really believe that our training is helping them to create good caregivers who not only can do the technical skills, but are also able to really embrace those power skills and provide excellent care to the residents in your facilities. So, our key takeaway is that by investing in workforce preparation, you really start to create a more adaptable, engaged, and future ready workforce so that your caregivers are there to meet your residents where they are and to work as care partners on your teams. All right. So now I'm going to turn it over to Chad, who is going to show you more of our demo and really let you see the product in action.
Well, great, and thank you, Melissa. But maybe before we do that, if anyone has any questions for Melissa, um, and then it's also Renee, who we were quoting, is actually on the call with us today. So
Oh,
nice to have
amazing.
you here, Renee.
Amazing. Yes, any questions, I'd be
And
happy.
you're all able to speak. You just have to take yourselves off mute. So, but with that, certainly, as I jump into things, do interrupt me if you have any questions as I run through things. But now I'm going to show you how we put things into practice, right? How are we building those power skills as you see training? I'm going to share my screen now and reduce a window. All right, and you should see my screen now, and it's about to go welcome Chad. So with that, so how do we bring this all together? And why do we do what we do? We're a company. We were founded 7 years ago, and one of our founders was an administrator in a skilled nursing facility. And the idea was, like you guys, he was tired of the constant churn of his caregiving staff. And, there are a number of issues that go into that, pay, it can be nurse management, it can be scheduling. But one thing that he was consistently seeing, and as Melissa was just talking about, was the fact that folks were trained using a textbook in a classroom lecture. Yes, they had 16 hours of clinicals or maybe 24 hours where they were on the floor of a long-term care facility. But at the end of the day, they had no idea what they were getting into. And as such, as soon as a challenge arose, they were out the door and down the street back to their job at Walmart or Taco Bell or where have you. And so the idea was, how can we better prepare them, introduce them to the actual role in a very realistic manner. And that's where this concept of story-based learning and actually creating a movie came into play. And the idea is you have Marissa, who is a new CNA, and she works with 8 different residents. And each of these residents has his or her own health issues. And we use a case study methodology to teach those. But they also have their own unique personalities and present their own and present challenges for Marissa as she works with them. And so we devised this to really, better inform the student, provide them with those power skills Melissa was talking about, but also the coping skills so they can navigate these challenges. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to walk you through how we teach by illustrating it with 2 of our residents and how Marissa works with them. One is Lily and one is Frank. Before I do that, just kind of some back office stuff. So if you guys already have CNA training programs, you'll know that there have to be tests, and those tests have to be graded. Well, that's all auto done by our system here. So tests are presented to the student, they complete them, and then a grade book auto populates with their results. We also have progress monitoring. This is designed to be an asynchronous program, meaning students can do it anytime, anywhere, without the need for an instructor present. Now, we have a number of different implementations. Most of our facility-based programs actually do bring the students in where they work. Maybe it's a conference room, it might be a training room, but where they work on their own on a computer or a tablet or a phone. Even 40% of our students do this on their phones. To me, that's crazy, but I'm old. But they're able to do that, and typically because of our, with our long-term care groups and our acute care groups, they're employees. You hire them before you put them into training, so you can have them come in. We work with community colleges, we work with proprietary schools across the country where that's not the case. And in those cases, these students are often doing this from home, and they might be doing it at 2 a.m. They might be doing it at 9 a.m. or what have you. But the idea is that we provide progress monitoring. So you as an instructor or an administrator are able to see exactly where your students are in real time and how they're performing. And then finally, we track that seat time because, as Melissa was saying, the bare minimum, the federal requirements is 75 hours. Up to, California requires 160 hours of total CNA training time. And depending upon what state you're in, because we have built this so that it works in all 50 states, it ranges from 40 hours to 60 hours of content depending upon the requirements of your state. So with that, I'm going to jump into things. And as I already said, please do feel free to interrupt me with any questions you might have. I'm more than happy to make this as conversational as possible. But as I said, so Lily, just to kind of set the program here, I'm going to use Lily to show you how we teach the content. And then I'm going to jump over to our resident Frank to show you how we use the movie to teach. And with Lily, we meet her in episode 2. And so the idea here is that, we've created this movie that I mentioned. The movie is roughly a little bit more than 3 hours of content, but it's broken down into mini episodes. And I'm not going to spend time with Lily's episode today, but just to give you a little background, we meet her in episode 2, and she's this young woman who's out for a run. And after her run, she's a triathlete. After her run, unfortunately, she's in a very bad car accident. So she ends up in this skilled nursing facility for rehabilitation. I'm going to skip around today as well because I have a special account. This program is locked down for your students. They have to do each activity to completion before and get this green check mark before they can move on to the next activity. And we do that for 2 reasons. Number one, we know it's natural. If you can skip around, you will. But if you do skip around, you're not going to get the seat time requirements to sit for your state's exam. So we have to lock it down. But much more importantly, as Melissa mentioned earlier, we built this for the adult learners. And the latest in learning science shows us that the best way to teach adults is to teach them small bits of information, easily digestible, taught in context, and then to build on that content over time and in complexity so that the learner masters the content. So that's exactly how we've done that here. So we will introduce concepts and then we will build on those concepts throughout the program. So very different than a typical lecture where you're following a textbook and you've got a chapter on the circulatory system and cardiovascular care, and that's where you're spending your time, and then you move on to something else and you never revisit it. That is not how this works here. So typical chapter for us is chapter 2 on vital signs in the physical exam. We start with a quick introduction followed by what we call a close-up video. And a close-up video is where you have an expert or experts speaking to the topic at hand. And mine did not advance. So
vital signs are basically measurements of how.
Sorry.
Vital signs are basically measurements of how a person is functioning in the crudest way. So blood pressure, heart rate, respiration rate, and temperature. Knowing those things, one knows without even knowing anything else if the person's relatively healthy or relatively ill.
Vital signs are literally that. They are what is vital to human life.
Well, vital signs is pretty much quote unquote the GPS of one's health. It's a very objective way of learning how well patient organ systems are working.
You keep track of a resident's vital signs because.
All right, and I'm going to stop it here. And I use this particular close-up video because it really lays out kind of the broad array of experts we utilize. So we have a physician from Columbia's Medical School, a geriatrician. We feature nurses, we feature dietitians, social workers, administrators. But most importantly, we feature 3 longtime CNAs. First and foremost, no one knows the role better than they do. Jamila here is a 30-plus year veteran in South Florida. But at the same time, there's a concept called learner-centered design. And the idea there is students who can see themselves in their learning are more engaged, which leads to better outcomes. And I think we'll agree that your typical CNA candidate can't really relate to the physician I started this off with, but they can relate to Jamila. So with that, we then jump into the lion's share of instruction. And for that, replacing that lecture format, we use digital videos that we refer to as in-focus videos. And these are videos that allow for true multimodal learning. So your auditory learner, your visual learners are engaged by using sounds and graphics and music and so on to meet them where their learning style is. So I'll play a little bit on blood pressure here.
If you've been to the doctor, you've probably had your blood pressure taken. Do you know what the top and bottom numbers of a blood pressure reading mean? And maybe you know someone with high blood pressure, but do you know what this means for the person's health and wellness? The final vital sign we'll study is blood pressure, which is a measure of the force of blood moving through the artery when a person's heart beats. This is controlled by two factors. 1, the force of each heart contraction. 2, the amount or volume of blood pumped with each heartbeat. Blood pressure has two measurements, each measured in millimeters of mercury, or mmHg. But what does this really mean? The first is systolic pressure, which is the period during the heart's contraction. Systolic pressure is the higher of the two numbers in a blood pressure reading. So, for example, in a blood pressure reading of 120/80, 120 is the systolic pressure.
All right, now I'm going to stop it there, as I think that this does a nice job of showing how, in a very high quality manner, we convey the material that they have to have in order to sit for the written component of the state CNA exam. We also have some read-in reviews. We have 74 worksheet activities, which function like quizzes. And this one, just to run through it quickly, but while they function like a quiz, they aren't actually graded. But the idea here is should take 5 minutes. It's on vital signs. And while it's not graded, you have to get the question right before you can move forward. So which is the easiest, most common site for taking a person's pulse? I'll get it correct. It's radial. I'm told it's correct. I'm good to go. But I'll get this one wrong. The three processes, breathing, heart function, and producing heat, are measured by which four vital signs? Well, I know flexibility is not one. I'm going to choose it. I'm told them it's incorrect and why. And now I've got to go back and find the correct answer, which, by the way, these change every time. So I actually have to read them before I can move forward. So real quick, 7 questions, about 5 minutes. And we want to make sure they got that core content down before we move forward and build on that. So, from here, we then move into a chapter on an overview of injuries, surgery, and musculoskeletal disorders. We have reflective posts where a student is asked to take a step back and reflect on what they've been learning. We have a discussion board that you as an instructor are able to utilize to hold a discussion, if they're not in person in your implementation. But I will admit, many of our implementations, these are simply a chance for a student to take a step back and reflect, which is a key to learning. We have an in-focus on basic emergency care. There's a close-up on an overview of surgery and rehabilitation. We then get into wound care. There's an episode with Marissa and Lily where Marissa observes that something's not quite healing right, and we utilize that to help to teach when to report your observations to your nurse. We then have a second chapter on infection control. We have an in-focus on bloodborne pathogens, close-up on clean and sterile gloving. We then get into positioning, rehabilitative, and restorative care. And then the final learning chapter here is bed bath transfers and discharges. And Lily is our one resident who gets to go home. And so in episode 7, she leaves the facility, and then we use that to teach what is the CNA's role in a discharge. And then finally, at the end of each section is a test. We start with some test-taking strategies to help a student get more comfortable with test-taking, and then we present a cumulative test. So this being practice test 2, it'll cover content from sections 1 and 2, all the way up to our section 10 test, which is a full-length simulated CNA exam. In most states, we require an 80 percentile or higher on these tests before you can move forward to the next section. And again, we want to make sure you have the core content down, that foundation before we build on it in the next section. If you don't pass it, there are a number of different ways that a student can pass it, as simple as taking the test again, to, we have a second test that can be given paper and pencil. It's really up to your implementation model, how we do that. So, and then, as I said, in different states work a little bit differently. So in order to pass this exam, the program in Kentucky, for instance, you have to have a cumulative 70% grade across the last 3 tests. So chapters 8, 9, and 10. But that's a state mandated thing, and we are able to meet that. So any questions on the content before I jump over and show you how we use the movie to teach? And you can take yourselves off mute if you want to ask, or you can always put something into the chat, and Kieran is monitoring monitoring it for us, excuse me. All right, well, I'm going to jump over to Frank now. And Frank, we meet in episode 8, and in the interest of time, I'm not going to play episode 8, and it's called Meet Frank, aptly enough. But Frank is moving into this skilled nursing facility in this episode. And so you meet him, you meet his daughter, Beth, and he's this real life of the party guy. Everybody loves Frank. He's a jokester, just one of those great individuals. But he's also very sick. He has lung cancer, heart disease, and COPD. And I'm going to pick it up with the next episode with Frank, and I'll explain why I chose this in a second, but you may pick up on some of it. And by the way, if this is a little stilted, like maybe the voice doesn't match up with the character, that's Zoom degrading the video. On my end, it's as if I'm watching, Netflix.
Those hands.
Good morning.
Oh, hi, Marissa. Come on in.
Hi.
Marissa, good morning.
How are the Graftons doing today?
Old Man River.
Just keeps on rolling on.
You got it. Marissa. If I'm not mistaken, your name means of the sea. Are you a mermaid, Marissa?
Big joker.
I can show you the world.
Nope. That's Aladdin.
That's also a classic.
Frank, is it okay if I check your temperature, your pulse, and then your breathing?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Okay, and have you had anything to eat or drink?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No, I always wanted a magic carpet, but I could never afford one.
Frank, I need you to stop talking so I can get your temperature, okay? All right. Can you handle that?
Yes.
Okay. One more time. Okay. I'll take that.
That was kind of nice, not having to hear my voice all the time.
All right, and I'm going to stop it there. And a couple of things I'm going to point out. One, earlier I talked about how we introduce content and then we build on it over time. So in section 2 with Lily, we had an introduction to vital signs. Well, now you're actually seeing Marissa take a resident's vital signs. But at the same time, there are a couple of power skills going on here that I want to point out. One is Marissa building a rapport with Frank, as well as his daughter, Beth, Frank, the new resident, which is an important skill, we want all of our caregivers to have. But you're also seeing how she deals with an uncooperative resident. And while, Frank's having a good time and he's joking around, he's still not doing what she needs him to do in order for her to do her job and take his temperature. So you see how she redirects him in a very kind and caring manner. And while, yes, it's easy with Frank, right? He's a great guy. He's easy. trust me, this is the approach that's featured throughout with Marissa's interactions with the 7 other residents, and some of them are not. Let's just say they're not like Frank. Okay, they're they're the opposite of Frank. Even they're pretty tough, but still, that is what the approach that's featured throughout. We utilize this episode in a chapter, reporting and recording objective and subjective information. So we teach what's the difference between subjective and objective. When should you report versus simply record? We teach common medical abbreviations. We then get into Frank's care. And so chapter 3 is on respiratory support. There's an in focus on the respiratory system and its disorders. There's an episode with Frank and Marissa on his COPD. We then get into his cardiovascular care, and there's a close-up on the cardiovascular system or cardiovascular disease inside the body, and in focus on the circulatory system and so on. We then get to Frank's cancer care. Remember, he's quite sick, and unfortunately for Frank, in episode 14 he develops an infection. And while we utilize this episode to teach isolation precautions, the chain of infection and so on, Frank's getting sicker. And in chapter 6, he becomes bedridden. And so we teach how to care for a bedridden resident, but we also have an episode 16 called Dignity. And the idea here is, how can a CNA help a resident whose body is shutting down, who can no longer perform many ADLs and so on? How can they help them maintain a level of dignity while they go through this? And then, moving on from there, Frank continues to go downhill. And in episode 17, Frank's decision, he decides it's his time. And I know that, I'm assuming you all work in long-term care. You've all seen this more times than you'd like to remember. But in this episode, while Frank's ready, his daughter Beth isn't. And she gets mad at her dad for giving up, but then she takes that anger out on the staff. So you see the conflict resolution skills they need to bring to the forefront in what is a very difficult situation. And then finally, we get here, and I'm going to play you 2 episodes in a row now to show you how we deal with end of life. And that's going to conclude what I wanted to show you today. So we'll open it up to questions and thoughts after this. So let me play these for you.
Frank is getting close to the end. Our residents have rights, and it's our duty to protect them all the way to the end. The right to have a sense of purpose, to reminisce, to touch and be touched, to laugh, to be angry or sad, to hear the truth, to be in denial, to spirituality,
Time. Stop.
and the right to be in control. When Frank goes, we cannot resuscitate him. That's his choice, and we must respect it.
In the next episode.
Hello, Beth?
Yes.
This is Nancy Fisher. Can you come down to see us? Hello? Hello? Beth, we're going to give you some time alone. You can stay as long as you like.
We're here if you need anything. Mr. Ed Sampson. That's the first resident that I lost. I went home and bawled my eyes out. I thought about quitting. I walked in to work the next day. I didn't know what I was going to do. And then I realized that the other residents, they needed me. And that's when I knew what this is all about. And that's when I knew that I could do this and do it well.
So not the easiest thing to watch, but I think that does a nice job of illustrating how we teach those power skills like empathy and compassion. And at the same time, how we're better preparing the individual for the actual role, for the challenges they will face. And as you saw, it's not just introducing the challenge itself, but it's providing the coping skills, teaching the coping skills to help them successfully navigate that, so they don't run kicking and screaming for the door the first time a resident demonstrates sexual aggression, or they encounter racism or violence or abuse, or all the things we know that happen. We don't want them to happen, but that do happen in long-term care. So with that, that's where I wanted to end, and just want to open it up to questions for me and Melissa. More than happy to share our thoughts. And yeah, so Callie.
Yeah. Yes. Hi. Thank you. I think this is really helpful, but I had some questions because where I work, there's a lot of challenges. There has been for years, especially after COVID. As an educator of a long-term care and skilled nursing facility, I actually go to 5 buildings, and I'm having trouble with even getting people to listen to education because they're so short-staffed. I can't pull them off the floors for it. When I try, I get a lot of pushback. I mean, I'm constantly yelled at, disrespected, and part of me can't really blame them because they don't really have the time, and that's a company issue too. We don't pay them anymore to do education at home. So they know that they're already struggling to get their patients taken care of, and then I'm pulling them away. So I joined this because I was just curious if there was anybody who had some kind of, tips with that, because I try to make the education and learning fun. I really like the idea of the videos you guys have. It's just trying to figure out a time when I can get them to do that, because they're not going to do it at home if they don't get paid, and our company won't pay them for it.
Yep.
And I have to do trainings every week, and it's just, I spend most of my time, I feel kind of useless. I'm trying to hunt people down, and it's just, I don't have time for this, Callie. We don't have anybody. And I honestly, I understand. I do get it. So does anybody have any advice for that? I mean, I'm trying to make learning fun, maybe look at it as a little break from work, but it's tough.
So
It
Callie,
is.
I'll just throw in a little bit about what we hear from our clients and that challenge, because that's a very real challenge. But Melissa, I'm sure, has some ideas, but also others on the phone may, or on Zoom here may. But we hear it every day. Like my team doesn't have time because we are so understaffed to do something like this. And it does take leadership to step in and say, but if we don't do something like this, nothing's going to change. I mean, there's the old adage, how do you get yourself out of a hole? You stop digging, right? And that's the idea here. And we have seen, and we actually do have a couple of case studies where that's been the case. We have one that's coming to mind is in Wisconsin, a skilled nursing facility where they were in that situation where they were desperate. No one, and this is one of the greatest things I ever heard from one of our clients is, she said, everyone on the team can now take a vacation. Like they can actually take time off. And before they started working with us, they couldn't. And so it was not easy to get it implemented, to get things moving. But at the end of the day, if you can stop the leak in the dike, if you will, it helps solve things. But it's not easy. And so I don't know, Melissa, if you have anything to add, or anyone else on the Zoom here.
It's a great question, Callie, and I think we often think like, oh, we have a very unique problem here, but unfortunately, I would say everybody on the call probably has some level of the same problem in the building. When you don't have a lot of staff, they are having a lot of competing priorities, and just checking off that one last thing, right? In the education world, even though we need that again for compliance, it's really challenging. We do have, after this call, we will be sending out within the next couple of days, just some ideas of ways to make your training a little bit more engaging. Like you said, you want it to be fun, but you also want it to be meaningful and applicable. Another thing that I've seen be really successful is not segregating your aides from your nurses, from therapy, but really pulling everybody in, because we all have such different focus in how we care, and we can learn so much from each other. So making some of that, live training so that they get to learn from other staff, not just from one person. But I think what we send you may also help as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I think being proactive, it's probably going to be a little hard starting off trying to take people away, but I do agree with you guys. We're just putting a Band-Aid over a bullet wound if we don't get to the root of the problem here. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anyone else have a question? Or any advice for Callie too, if you've got training methods that have been very successful for you. Sometimes, we learn best from each other, and what has worked well for others sometimes will work in our own buildings. Quiet group.
Yeah, very quiet. So you're all able to take yourselves off mute if you, again. But otherwise, I mean, we can give you a few minutes back. Renee.
Yeah, I was just going to share, I think, going back to how cinematic health can improve retention, and how it's helped me. I think I've been in this training program administrator role for about 3 years now, and we've been using Cinematic Health for about the same time. I came in, they had only used Cinematic Health once before I took on this role in 2023. So And I was just fortunate to kind of get our retention rates on our training program, and kind of happy to share that we went from 40% retention rates in 2022 to nearly 79% in 2025. So, and I think part of that is the success of Cinematic Health and how I structure using it with our course. It's our, a fast-paced 5-week course before they can sit for their exam. And it's really getting them ready for the workforce. I'm actually in acute care hospital setting, so it's a little bit more that I have to tailor it to make them workforce ready. But it's, I hear all the time that our trainees coming through the program are ready, they are knowledgeable, they have the professional skills, they have, the empathy skills. They're really kind of they set the bar a little high for our LNA population. So just sharing our success again with Cinematic Health.
Well, thank you, Renee. We absolutely appreciate that. And I had not heard those retention numbers, and those are very impressive. So thank you for sharing those.
Those are hot off the press. I just got them a week ago. So
awesome.
Amazing.
So any other comments or questions? Well, not to beat a dead horse. So we have Latika and Melissa on here as well, Melissa Castiglione, and they will follow up with each of you. They're our account executives. So they'll follow up. So if you do have other questions, you'll certainly have an opportunity to get them answered.